So, ladies and gentlemen,
you got it. So the most important challenge in the world today, and number one for the UN Sustainable Development Goals, is no poverty. Of those people living in poverty, the vast majority are in farming, fishing, or part of their often remote rural communities. There's good organisations around the world are investing trillions to address this issue, but they generally struggle to connect with the users that they're trying to help, and that's what AgUnity does, connects the last mile users. Because you cannot address poverty without solving financial inclusion, and you cannot address financial inclusion at scale without technology that's relevant to address it. So, a decade ago, Apple and other smartphones changed the world for people like us. They gave us convenience, entertainment in the palm of our hands. But they didn't do anything for the poor. This phone cost a year's income in most of the countries we work. And as much as your developing world farmer might love Facebook or music or YouTube as much as we do, those things do not help them work, earn more, or feed their children. So, as I said, I'm David Davies, and at AgUnity, we developed a smartphone and blockchain solution that is transforming the lives of these people because it's relevant to them. And it's relevant to them because it's easy to use and it addresses the real issues that exist in their community, not the ones that we see from ours. So the main areas of those ones we solve is a user experience that was designed specifically for people with low literacy that have probably never had any technology before in their lives. It securely records transactions on blockchain, so no one can ever say something didn't happen. A very major problem in the area. It solves the issues with poor communication in remote regions. And finally, we've developed a very cost-effective means of deploying it and supporting it at scale, which is the other issue that a lot of organisations have. So, I don't know if anyone's familiar with what super apps are. Facebook's the one that we're all familiar with. WeChat in China is extremely popular. These are applications that do a lot of things under this, and they don't necessarily do everything that's in the application. They just the platform that deploys it. And AgUnity is the super app for the forgotten end of the market. And kind of like an app store, one of the things that we are doing now, this wasn't on the agenda 2 years ago. One of the things that we do now is we encourage others to build applications or adapt applications or migrate them to our platform and build their own communities to solve a different problem that we solve. So we don't solve the whole thing ourselves. We give a platform that solves the basic issues and then bring others to it. So a lot of the companies that are in our market that would be competitors are actually potential customers for us. When a community starts to use AgUnity and farmers, it becomes more compelling for others to use it. The shopkeeper, the jeep driver, the truck, eventually everyone has it, and the more applications we put on, the more compelling it becomes because they all use it. So because we encourage others to build applications on our platform to solve different problems, we've got a realistic plan to get to 100 million people in about the next 10 years. And revenue-wise, we just generate a small transaction fee which adds up to a couple of dollars a week. Solving this was not easy. In order to even understand the challenges, we went out and lived and worked with farmers in some of the most remote regions of Africa, Asia and the Pacific, and we saw firsthand what their real challenges were, things that would have gone over the head of even a farmer in Australia. We refined that by working with NGOs, banks, buyers of commodities most recently, and also working with cooperatives like this one in Indonesia that is actually running at the world's best practice. So we're taking best practices and taking them into the developing markets. For our customers, we fill the gap between applications that are too complicated for them to understand or use, and things that are just too simple and general purpose to have any meaningful impact on their daily lives. But our actual customers are not the users. Our actual customers are the people, the NGOs and the other organisations trying to help lift them out of poverty. So service providers selling products and goods into them. This one's become extremely big recently is banks. We've discovered that banks that are trying to reach the last mile users, normal mobile banking systems just don't work. We solved all those problems and now we've got banks paying us to build mobile banking on our platform for developing nations. Commodity buyers that want to buy sustainable product, want to buy sustainably or show their customers what the provenance of their goods are. And then finally the development programs, the NGOs that invest hundreds of millions of dollars in these areas that don't really know what the impact they're having on them. So we've got a couple of projects with all of these running now. And in the last year, we've been licensing our technology in Australia and other developed markets. So we've got applications for wool growers in the southern states. We're doing a couple of things with fisheries and red meats, but most importantly, we license the technology behind a startup that has got the world's biggest fresh food tracking produce for a $50 billion retail chain. I have to be anonymous about that, so when I say in Singapore, no one really knows who it is, but you can all guess. We're tracking $1 billion of produce in a pilot, and we build all the technology for that company. So this has been good for us because we've got $1 million a year $1 million a year revenue and a lot of equity. So this has allowed us to raise funding to grow our business and scale it. Of course, this is done because we have an incredible team with deep experience in technology, sustainable development, farming, and operations. And along the way, last couple of years, we've won quite a number of awards. Most notably last year, Global Agripreneur of the Year, and we've been written up by the who's who of NGOs, universities, and other organisations as a model of sustainable development. This was all done on a relatively small amount of investment, and because we've been doing a mix of things, we've got a couple of million of assets and balance sheets, so it's all looking very good. We're doing a raise now to sort of take us to the next level of scale. And we're in a pretty good position to do that. So one of the things that I'm always interested in doing is when we get the message out, please do share what we're doing, because we are at the bottom of the line trying to help millions of people change their lives transformational. So anyone that you think might be interested in this, if you could share a link of us, we really appreciate that.
And I want to open it up to questions from the audience, and one of the questions I always get when I do share an AgUnity, and they go, so it's an app. And they go, what's the big deal? Okay, and this is where it comes into that. We were saying 3 years ago they were struggling to explain to people what they were trying to do.
3 years ago it was an app.
Yeah.
Now we've actually, in the last couple of years, the last iterations, we've rewritten the Android operating system. So we reinstalled the operating system on the phone because that's the only way we can solve the communication issues. So all the transactions that happen, good examples are banks. So a couple of banks in the Pacific have been funded, like you wouldn't believe, to give bank accounts to people in remote regions. They give them bank accounts, but they haven't got phones, they've never had one before. Doesn't work very well. Farmers in New Guinea, when their bank account goes to zero, they'll delete the app. If there's no connectivity, they'll absolutely think the bank has stolen their money. And when they get connectivity again, they think the bank gave it back because they found them out. If you come from those environments, you can see technology, these are normal things. So mobile banking apps don't work, and one of the things we had to solve was make the operating system, so all the transactions basically cache, and when you get a little bit of signal, it pushes them through. The other one is the user interface. To us, an Android phone seems simple because we've had them for 10 years, right? I still use an iPhone, I can't deal with Android. But the cheaper smartphones are really not good for people that have got technology for the first time. Our one has got that simple interface, only 5 things on it, all the things they do every day, and that's really been the transition. So when you do banking, you just press the banking thing and it's got move money in, move money out, put money in the pension fund, end of story. Nothing too complicated.
And when you say our phones, what do you mean by our phones?
Yeah, so we get phones, again, this has changed. We used to get $20 smartphones. We actually found that the market's a bit different from that. Now we're getting $50 IP68. So IP6 is full water dust proof and shock resistant. We find that the farmers, and again, most cases, the commodity, like, you know, in the case of Highlands, New Guinea, a big Japanese commodity buyer, they import a lot of coffee from Indonesia. Japanese customs, being what Japanese customs are, they reject 5 to 10% of it because of mould, so they're losing tens of millions of dollars on poor coffee. And because they're buying it from a buyer, and there's like 6 levels back from them, they've got no idea why some bags of coffee are mouldy and others. So they're quite happy to pay for the farmers in Guinea to have a phone and be able to organise themselves so they can trace the origin of the coffee and they can go back to the farmer and say, these ones are getting mouldy and fix your process. To them, it's a really good ROI. So in most cases, an NGO or a bank or someone actually pays for the phones. But even when the farmers pay for themselves, if it's actually being for them, a $50 phone that's good seems to be rather, we've leveled up on that one. So even if they buy it themselves, it comes all pre-installed, but it's a pretty decent phone. They're like about like an iPhone 6 really in features. When we get them out of China in bulk for $50, and when we go to the deal with the bank in the Pacific, the manufacturer will actually colour lovely bright yellow phones with the AgUnity and the bank's brand on them, and everything's pre-installed. So it comes out of the box, all set up for us. So at the moment we've got a bit of an annoying manual process replacing operating systems on phones.
So they basically started with their own thing, and then they got in expert help.
So we're on like the 4th generation.
Yeah.
Of migrating through this, and it's been massive amounts of
4th generation in 3 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
We evolve quickly.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's because of listening, and you know, that's the key to this, right? We're doing anything to listening to who your customers are and what they want and adapting to the needs, not thinking you know better than them.
Okay. So we've got some questions for David, because, you know, yeah.
Hi David. Great app you got there. My name is Leslie. So 2 questions. One is, how do you overcome language differences, and do you educate the users in different languages? And secondly is, what do you do in remote areas or connectivity? You know, if they're in a remote area connectivity.
Two huge issues. Firstly, the whole system changes languages, but we don't rely on the languages. It's all simple geometric, you see there. Simple geometric shapes and basic primary colours. You press the blue button when you're delivering stuff. So we don't train them based on any sort of words. And this is what we spend a lot of time with the user interface. We never do more than one thing on the screen at one stage. So I'm delivering cocoa beans to the cooperative. What is it? Cocoa beans. How many bags is it? When am I delivering? One thing at a time, because that gets you over the user, the usability, the need to read. And then all of it translates, and we're working on actual language voiceover prints. That'll be up later in the year. So, yeah. The major thing we invested in was getting the user interface for it works. That's our distinguishing feature, and that's what makes us different from a Facebook or someone if they come try to do this. It's very hard to come from a developing world market solution and simplify it down. Much easier to go the other way. And I struggle always with our team trying to put too complicated features into it. Our developers don't get as much time with the farmers, so they do tend to like to complicate things. And myself and our deployment team, mostly based in Indonesia, they know this very well. So we have this to and fro. With the communication, it's interesting. There usually is the predominant problem with communication is farmers can't always pay their data plans. So we do a couple of things for that. That's why we built it on the operating system, because we can cache transactions on the phone and you can hotspot off someone else's phone. And the other thing we're building at the moment, and I hasn't put it on my diagram yet, we're building like towers that look a bit like a street light that we stick up in the village, and that gives Wi-Fi and LoRa and connects to the cellular network, and basically they all share one connectivity. And so their phones work in the signal. Most of the places we go though, even like remote areas of Solomons, they know which hill to walk up if they want a signal. The problem is the usability. Like I want to hand over to Brett my cocoa beans here. The phone actually, when the phones communicate with each other, we use QR codes back and forth. So I'll show him my cocoa beans, I'll say, handing over some cocoa beans, I'll show him a QR code. He'll scan the QR code, he'll go, okay, David's handing me some cocoa beans, I'm going to weigh them. Yeah, 60 kilograms. He'll show me a QR code, I'll scan it. We both got the same transaction. That worked without any signal. And it wouldn't matter if neither of us went near a cell tower for a month. When it finally does, it gets both one or both of the transactions and it reconciles them. And the whole thing's really hard, like super securely encrypted. So it would be infeasible that those two things didn't match.
So we had another question. Yeah.
A few. First one is, what blockchain technology do you use? Did you develop your own, or did you use Ethereum?
Yeah, look, I'm not a huge fan of Ethereum. We use multi-chain at the moment, but actually the technology is pretty much chain agnostic. We use blockchain in the most simple way. It's a transaction log only. And I'm not a blockchain zealot that would push blockchain into solutions that are not necessary. We use it just because the farmers that we deal with, they don't trust their government, they don't trust anybody. And we can say to them, when I hand my cocoa beans over to Brett, that transaction's happened. As soon as the transaction gets written back, no one can ever say it didn't, because we're hosting nodes and we're working with Asia Development Bank and Gates Foundation to host nodes themselves. So to corrupt the network, you have to get a lot of collusion. So we are probably only ever host maybe 10 nodes,
yes.
And we can move this from, we're at the moment discussing moving to a more efficient blockchain.
Which brings to a secondary question, what about defaults beyond the blockchain? People just simply not doing the right thing. Like in a blockchain, you might have your credit card connected to a smart contract and someone just cancels the credit card, for example. What about those sorts of
Just fix everything.
No.
I
just wondered the impact that has on how you...
There is a really interesting thing I said, and I read a study about graffiti in New York, that when they managed to clean the trains up, the whole crime went down. And that's what I think we've seen, and I've been, a number of universities write us up, and I'm trying to get them to come out in the field and actually analyse this, because I think once you've got some of the transactions, everyone else recorded and people know you can't think. I'm seeing already people that are acting inherently honestly with things that we're not tracking. And so I think once you create a basis of society to be honest, it just flows from there. People just become fundamentally honest.
Yeah, there's a TED talk about that with rubbish and Union Street. It's much the same thing.
Yeah.
It's aimed at the environment, actually.
And so I think we're doing that with the basic record keeping. That like when things are being handed over, and things are being paid, and all those things are being recorded, I think the whole society just becomes honest, and it's almost like another thing in these societies. It's not really dishonestly. It's because I'm selling grapes and beans. I know he's going to try to get a better price for himself because there's no agreed thing. So I'm going to try to get it better with him. And when I come back the next day to get paid, I'm going to say it's a bit more just because he might do the same. As soon as you take that ambiguity out of it, that behaviour stops. It's clear. So yeah, it seems to have a very positive impact, and I'd love to get a major university to study that in depth. I think it'd be fascinating.
Yeah, I want to chat to a couple of people on that. The question up the back, Shalini.
Yeah, I just wonder, when you go into the communities, do you have early adopters? Like, how do you get...
Oh, we're giving them a free phone
Yeah,
usually.
I know it's one thing giving them a free phone, but to get a community to accept something that is entirely foreign to them. So do you work closely with a core group who then take your message out, or how do you do that? How did you what's the word? Make it
Yep.
Yeah.
So we were overwhelmed with projects that we could run, so we have a very careful selection procedure as to which ones we do, and that's because I have a nasty habit of saying yes to everything, and the team got really upset with it that we were doing 10 projects in the next month, and so they created what they call the beauty pageant, and they've got multiple criteria, and they mark every project based on who's supporting it, how trusted is the person, what's the stability, what's the impact we can have on the farmers, and so we do all that criteria. That moves one project to the top of our list, and so typically we're cherry picking the good projects. Now, the main criterion then is who we are working with, and do they want to improve their situation. That's almost always a yes, because we get great results in the field. So it's not hard to find those projects, but that's the top criteria, is having like a fertile ground essentially for what we're doing.
Yep. Any other questions? Are we happy to go back down the front? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
You obviously said you led with the app first. I wonder how much legal, I mean, within limits, how much legalese you actually get into in terms of, the contract issues or the constitutions of co-ops and so on. And over here, obviously, it's a lot more developed in a legal sense.
Well, you can teach your land issues with T's and C's lines.
Yeah, sure. I just wondered how you cope with that in terms of the co-ops themselves of about 100 people, or whether that's already pre-existing. Or
In most cases, there's very limited, like they're really self-formed. Yeah. At the moment, most of the farmers that we deal with don't read to any significant degree where they could sign a contract.
Yep.
So what they're dealing with the cooperatives is a lot of trust and a lot of non-transparent trust. So when we started this, it was actually at a hackathon in London. We weren't trying to do this at all. We were working on a technology to disrupt Willenberg. Happened to go to a fintech conference in London. There was a hackathon, like co-founder, bless him, loves these hackathons. So he entered it, calls me up in Australia, says, we've got to win this as a prize from Singularity University. We want to go to Singularity University. This was the idea for that. He presented it. Costa Perrig, who runs financial inclusion for Gates Foundation, was there. He beeline John after it. He said, look, we see this everywhere. You guys just nail it. We want you to take it seriously. That's how it started. Absolutely accident. And within a couple of months, we transitioned, and it was the whole big thing we were working on. The Gates Foundation recounted the thing that they like to work with cooperatives of farmers. There's no point helping one farmer. You've got to help in a big group, and you've got to do it in a replicable way. You've got to create it. And that's what we do. We create a cooperative of 100 farmers, and we try to create that sort of model. And so the next village will want to either copy them, or some people will break off of this and form the seed of the next cooperative. Because it's great to help 100 people, but it's much better to help 1 million people. And Gates Foundation said that time after time they've had a cooperative running really well, they've stepped away from it, and it's fallen down sometimes in a matter of weeks. And usually it's because someone will make a mistake, because they've taught farmers to do record keeping, and that's going to end badly.
Yes. Just two quick ones. So the last one is, or second one is, you mentioned government, lack of trust in the government authorities, or perhaps the powers to be in various places you go, and of course corruption is an issue worldwide. What sort of resistance in terms of local authorities and other sorts of things, simple power taking, things that you've set up and all that? What sort of resistance have you met there, if any?
Yeah, we've had a few incidents, a few issues. Our first project in Kenya went really successfully, but it ran up to the Kenyan election and things got really dodgy. We had to let Kenya sort of rest because of that. We spent a lot of effort trying to do a project in Myanmar, and although Myanmar is now a democracy, the bureaucrats in government haven't figured that out yet. So it takes you 2 months to get an answer to an email. You cannot do anything unless you're in Naypyidaw, and Naypyidaw is actually a really expensive place to stay around, and they just move so slowly. So it wasn't that we couldn't do it in Myanmar, it's just that you could see the same project we did in New Guinea that it took 3 months would take 3 years in Myanmar, so we're just too hard. So we don't get resistance from governments. Usually, we come in, Ethiopia, we're working with the World Food Programme, and they just sort everything out for us, getting phones into the country. We just tell World Food Programme we're shipping to you, you sort it out, and they do it. They're usually working with NGOs or big commodity buyers. The governments love you. Because we're driving economic growth in their country at the end of the day and making their people happy. So which government, it's only a very strange situation where the government wouldn't like that.
And lastly, IP protection. What sort of protections have you gone into? Not only where you go, but in the first world, dealing with first world partners and corporations and banks you mentioned.
Yeah.
So what sort of IP protections? Patents on your tech?
No, we haven't patented. I don't think anything's. I'm not a huge believer in patents.
Yes.
The technology behind the company that's doing the trial for the big supermarket chain, that's built on the technology we're actually building to compete with Bloomberg. That's got some. We're super secretive about that because that's got some killer patents in the cryptology area.
Yep.
It's that solution is built on something that's a bit like a blockchain, but not. For anyone that's technical around, if you can imagine something between torrent and blockchain, like a hybrid of those two things, it's that type of technology. So we've got some patents on that one, and we've got some patents that we will file on that one. But they're really tricky to write, and that's particularly valuable in the developing market. You know, to be honest, if someone copied me and did what we did better, they're going to help millions of people. And please do it, because this is a massive problem that really needs to be addressed. And the thing we've learned in the last 3 years, it can actually be solved. You can fundamentally change. We're now seeing villages that were, right on the edge. Now the farmers are earning more, the shops are earning more, they're buying stuff in, they're getting solar lighting in the village, they're buying more land, they're planting more seeds. You see the whole community thing. So that can actually happen, and we're not doing it by giving them grants or giving them money, we're doing it by giving them just some basic tools that they need to grow their own economy. And I think that's the best story I know for solving that big poverty issue. Not grant people, but actually help them grow, help them build their own economies.
Do their own little bit. Yeah. So I think we've got to move it on to send the next speaker to have. But thank David Davies.